Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller, along with Manny Hill, here on a Monday evening following championship weekend, of which we will definitely get to the Detroit Lions. And I want to begin, though, Manny, with Twitter, also known as X to some people, not to me. Always will be Twitter, no matter what they name it or what logo I got to click to open it on my phone. Either way. And it's a disaster out there, man. Social media, oh man, every day it's bad, but today it was especially bad because of the complete and utter nonsense involving the Detroit Lions. And I can't get over Dan Campbell, of all people, being attacked for being too analytical when really he was just doing what he always did. But that's not what stuck out to me on social media. I expected that from kind of the usual suspects of, look, a thing didn't go right that may have been analytical, which again, I didn't really think it was, but I'm going to use this to say what I've wanted to say. I don't know. Maybe these people are still mad about sabermetrics taking over baseball. But an oasis in the desert of complete nonsense was a tweet from Dane Brugler linked to an article about the Senior Bowl. And it says key Senior Bowl storylines this week. And we will have a correspondent in Alabama this week. It says you can bet the Bo Nix buzz will grow. And in parentheses, maybe into the top 10. Huh? What? Top 10? Dane Brugler, top 10 for Bo Nix? Why is it every time I think I came up with something that then everybody else figures it out? I thought I came up with, hey, maybe Bo Nix would be a good idea for the Vikings. Just like Anthony Richardson last year. I was like, hey, this guy. And then he ends up going fourth overall. He writes in the article, Manny, that Michael Penix is all over the map when it comes to analysts, scouts, and what they think of Penix. But that there's a possibility that if Bo Nix has a really good week, that he could be propelled up into the top 10 with so much interest for those top three quarterbacks. Give me your reaction about this new Bo Nix buzz.
I can't say I'm super surprised because it always feels like when every year in the draft or leading up to the draft, there's always like one quarterback that, somebody falls in love with, tweets it out, writes an article about it, and all of a sudden the projections of that guy, he's going to skyrocket. And sometimes it happens. Other times it's all just smokescreen stuff. And then the guy ends up getting taken in like the second round or something like that. We've kind of seen that. We kind of saw it with Will Levis last year, where there was kind of this Will Levis hype train going up, and people were thinking, oh, he might get taken in the top 5. And then he was a second round pick. So I'm not surprised by it. You and I think we kind of share a similar opinion on Bo Nix. We both like him, and there's a lot to like in his game with his athleticism. He's got a pretty good arm, good leader, has all the intangible things that you would want in a young quarterback. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We'll see how it really how it will play out. I mean, there are teams in the top 10 that are outside of the top 5 that you might think, hey, that team might take a quarterback. You never know. I mean, somebody like the New York Giants comes to mind. I mean, that's kind of a weird situation that they're in with the Daniel Jones contract. Do they want to stick it out another year with him? Who knows? I think that would be kind of a bad idea because I don't think Daniel Jones is very good. So, I mean, that's a team that might just say, hey, you know what? Let's just try with another guy. We know we've got sort of this albatross contract with Daniel Jones. We're not picking in the top 5. We're not going to get one of those top 3 guys. But you know what? We want to take another guy and pivot and go in a different direction. Let's just take Bo Nix here. What the hell? So it'll be interesting to see if something like that happens. And, the Vikings are going to have to obviously pay a lot of attention to this because they might end up being in a situation where they want to take a guy and that guy might not be there, and they might have to do some maneuvering, maybe trading up if they really want a guy at a certain spot. It'll be interesting to see what happens, though.
There is too many teams ahead of the Vikings that need quarterbacks.
Yep.
So if Bo Nix walks out of the Senior Bowl being considered a top 10 draft pick, he's going to get taken. I mean, as you said, like the New York Giants have a great argument for taking a quarterback, developing him for a year, or just getting rid of Daniel Jones. I mean, they might just have to eat that contract or whatever they have to do. But I don't know how you can run Daniel Jones out there with Brian Daboll as the only option. Maybe there's like a quarterback competition or something like that in training camp. Atlanta is another one where, I mean, what's Raheem Morris want to do there? Does he want to go out and get Kirk Cousins, or does he want to draft his own guy and put his own guy in with all those weapons and build it all together over years? Raheem Morris, you could see more of a long-term approach than if it was Bill Belichick, and Bill Belichick is 147 years old, and Mr. Burns there is on his last leg, so he's trying to just pick up veteran quarterback to win right now. Well, Raheem Morris doesn't have to look at it that way. They could look at it as much more of a complete type of build. Now, I was thinking about Bo Nix as I was watching Brock Purdy for the San Francisco 49ers, because now they're opposite in the fact that Bo Nix is humongous and Brock Purdy is not. And Bo Nix throws the football very hard. Brock Purdy does not. And uh, there is something similar, though, which is they both can move and they both can make plays well on the move. I was looking at this right now that Bo Nix only ran for 256 yards this year, but last year he ran for 519 yards and 14 touchdowns last season. That's pretty good. I mean, and just watching the playoffs overall, of course, Jared Goff is never going to be a quarterback that moves, and he certainly played well enough to win that game. He wasn't a part of a ball bouncing off a guy's face mask or the Jahmyr Gibbs fumble or any other of the calamities. In fact, it wasn't even maybe the worst drop from Josh Reynolds, because after San Francisco tied the game, he throws a perfect pass on third down to Josh Reynolds and it hits him right in the body and bounces off him. So I thought that, Goff played well enough to have his team in the Super Bowl and isn't a playmaker, but everybody else was. I mean, Lamar Jackson, obviously, and Patrick Mahomes. You don't necessarily need to be Jackson where you have to run for 1,000 yards per year, but the playmaking when things go wrong, being able to find a way. I mean, that long 16-play touchdown drive by the Chiefs is Patrick Mahomes scrambles. Patrick Mahomes scrambles. He makes a little bit of a play. And I really like that about Nix's game. I've started to sit down and watch Bo Nix a lot more, considering that there is this buzz and there's sort of a feeling by some people that Michael Penix's issues with the health and ACLs and so forth are going to make him drop. And also his lack of playmaking makes me a little more sketchy about picking him. I guess I wasn't as concerned because he's got a cannon, but as I'm watching Brock Purdy, it's like stuff goes wrong or he doesn't see where he's supposed to go with the football and runs for 20 yards. I kind of want that in my life, Manny. We got it for about this long with with Josh Dobbs for like 2 weeks. We got a little bit of what it's like to have a play breakdown and a guy make a play. So I am extremely curious to see what Bo Nix does this week and what the buzz is that comes out about him, because I'm kind of feeling more and more somebody who can scramble and make plays off schedule.
Yeah, and Bo Nix has had, a really interesting journey in his collegiate career. He started out at Auburn. There were a lot of high expectations for him. Things didn't go quite as well. Auburn made a coaching change. I remember he played in the Outback Bowl back then. It was known as, it's a different name for the bowl game now, against the Gophers after the 2019 season. And and he showed some signs of being pretty good, made some mistakes in that game as well. And then they fired Gus Malzahn after that and paid him like $21 million to go away. Auburn did. So Bo Nix kind of went through a coaching change and then just kind of realized Auburn wasn't the right spot for him. And then he transferred to Oregon, a program that, has been a little bit more, I think, progressive offensively, in terms of just historically with Chip Kelly and Mark Helfrich and some of those other guys in the past. And, he just fit in with that culture up there perfectly. And Dan Lanning, the head coach out there, did a great job, and they had a great season this year. They only lost to Washington. They lost to Washington twice. He lost to Michael Penix twice. Otherwise, they really kind of obliterated everybody else, and Bo Nix was excellent. I mean, he just played really well this year, and so I think it shows a lot of character with him. I think to go through the stuff he went through at Auburn, to have high expectations, things not really work out, change, have a change of scenery, and find his way and find the right spot for him. And just to show the leadership qualities, I think was really impressive. And I think that's something that I think can carry over into the NFL. And he's got the physical tools. I mean, he can run. He's a good athlete. The arm is there. I think it's just a matter of him getting in the right situation with smart offensive coaches, get him some weapons early on. And, he's an older guy. He's not he's not like 20, 21 years old with no experience. I think, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, he started more games than anybody else in the history of college football. So he's got a lot of experience playing a lot of football over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that can bode well for him. It seems like he can be a guy, and you never know with these guys, but I think with all the playing experience that he's had, he seems like a guy that I won't guarantee this, but would I be surprised if he stepped in right away as a rookie and had a lot of success? I wouldn't be, because he's played a lot of football. He's got a good head on his shoulders. And, I think he's got a chance. He's got enough physical tools, I think, to be really successful in the NFL.
Thrown almost 2,000 passes as a college quarterback,
Yeah.
which is a lot of experience and time to develop for sure. Scott in the comment section says, Bo reminds me of Fields. He panics often. Now, I can't really find that in the numbers, though. That's the thing, is he was one of the quickest from snap to release, which did involve a lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage, but also he graded a 95 by PFF when throwing it over 10 yards. He was the highest graded quarterback under pressure and was one of the best, only next to Michael Penix, at avoiding sacks. And so I also think when we're trying to evaluate a guy, can he read defenses? Sometimes I'll see that and I'm like, what? The NFL doesn't even know who can read defenses when they scout them, much less you or me sitting there watching his highlights on YouTube. I mean, you really don't ever know whether somebody is going to be able to step in or not. It looks like we've got our weekly Manny head frozen. Kind of froze with a nice little grin this time, though. Usually he looks at me very skeptically when he freezes, but not this time. So we'll get Manny back in a second. Oh, wait, he's back. There you go.
Am I back?
You unfroze. Yeah, good
There
for
we
you.
go.
Hey, you're good. You're good. So anyway, I think that when you look at the data, he has the strongest numbers of anybody when it comes to the under the radar stuff, how he plays under pressure, how he avoids sacks, the actual yardage, not how college football does the yardage, which is including sacks. That makes no sense to me. But how he pushes the ball down the field. He apparently, according to his Wikipedia page, which is always 100% factual on Wikipedia, he ran a 4.57 coming out of high school. So, I mean, we're really talking about somebody that is a great athlete, has a big arm, can scramble, can run, got rid of the ball quickly. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that now Dane Brugler is talking about the potential of him going quite high. And not to mention, the man threw 45 touchdowns and 3 picks. Can we like discuss that for a second? And with with Joe Burrow, and I'm not saying he's Joe Burrow, but with Joe Burrow, he had the same issue where the age, while he already, aged out. And plus, people talked about, well, he's got Jefferson and Jamar Chase, who turned out to be even better than anybody would have thought they would have been. And okay, so this is why he's great. Edwards-Helaire was a first-round pick. He had him in the backfield. And yet, so you could make that argument about Nix at Oregon. Well, he's got all these weapons. Well, he had a good system. He had a good team. He had a good line. He had everything else. But we've seen it go all over the place. We've seen quarterbacks like Josh Allen have a terrible team and put up terrible numbers and become a great quarterback. And we've seen guys who had great teams around them also become really good. The bet that I would be making here is really on the arm and athleticism. It would be entirely on the tools, and then I guess the league will try to figure out whether he can read defenses and so forth. So we'll see what happens at the Senior Bowl. I mean, Manny, I feel myself just being convinced so easily on quarterbacks, but I am really fascinated to see how this ends up playing out with the Senior Bowl coming out of it, because obviously the Vikings will be down there. I'm sure Kevin O'Connell is going to be down there to watch the practices, watch the games. And I want to know whether they come out of it thinking we might be able to get our quarterback out of this group, or, we might want to look at Spencer Rattler in the fourth and look for a development quarterback because there's nothing past Jaden Daniels. I'm really fascinated to see it.
I am too. And I'm just fascinated at how, what everybody is going to be feeling about, Michael Penix and Bo Nix specifically after the Senior Bowl. The things that I'm kind of looking for with them is just like, how do they handle, situational stuff? The Senior Bowl is always interesting because it's a collection of, players that haven't really, a lot of these guys may know each other from, being recruited by the same coaches and things like that. But a lot of them haven't really played together on the same team. And so there's always kind of that aspect of it that's working against them. And so I'm always kind of interested to see like how these guys handle those situations of not being really familiar with the guys that they're throwing the ball to. Can they develop a quick chemistry with certain guys, and how they handle certain situations, third and long situations. They go through their progressions. Do they throw with good timing and accuracy and anticipation? All of those things that the NFL looks for with quarterbacks. Those are the things you kind of look for to see if there's signs of that. And I'm just fascinated. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be glued to it because, especially now for the first time in a while, I'll be really intrigued by watching the quarterbacks in the Senior Bowl, because the team that I follow, the team I've been a fan of, probably going to be the first time in a while that we'll be really paying attention to those guys for a specific reason. So it's going to be fun. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it.
Hopefully it doesn't turn out like the last time I watched it closely, which was Malik Willis, Sam Howell, and Kenny Pickett in the Senior Bowl. And the one thing I'm always a little hesitant about, even as dialed in and as excellent at his job as Dane Brugler is, and you can really tell how good he is because everyone plagiarizes his work throughout draft season. Shout out to Benjamin Robinson, a guy who tracks mock drafts, who showed a chart of where if Dane Brugler moves somebody up, that the rest of the mocks will follow. And it's like, oh, well, I guess we know how this thing works. So Dane is really dialed into this, and he would have a sense for where these guys are coming out. But sometimes with the quarterback, there's so much like what do they call smoke and mirrors and that kind of stuff, that in the Senior Bowl, we came out kind of thinking Malik Willis might be a first round pick. And then it was only Kenny Pickett who ended up in the first round. So in a way, like I really want to see it and see how he reacts, to NFL coaching for a week, and how he plays, like you said, with the other players that he's got to try to find quick chemistry with, how he looks against really good players. Because this is not only it's a good collection, but now in the Senior Bowl, coincidentally, they can also have juniors now. So there's like more talent there than has been before in the Senior Bowl. And we'll definitely be watching that closely for how Bo Nix and Michael Penix react. Some of you in the comments are talking about a Kirk Cousins contract situation. Digital Plains Media says, do you think Kirk Cousins contract demands were leaked by the Vikings or the Cousins camp? I do not know what we're talking about here. Anthony says, if Kirk Cousins is really going to be demanding 2 years, 90 million guaranteed, can go somewhere else. What is that? Is there something I missed, Manny?
Yeah, so I saw something, I think it was from Charlie Walters, that said he heard that it's something like Kirk Cousins could demand 2 years, 90 million fully guaranteed. And I saw it and I just kind of chuckled because it's like he can demand that all he wants, but I ain't giving him that. And I don't think the Vikings would either. So that's kind of, I think, what everybody's talking about.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Well, I guess I would say that his demands don't really matter versus what someone
Exactly.
is willing to pay him. And now, I guess my question always is when something starts circulating around the internet and gets picked up by aggregators and tweeted out and stuff like that, is that what he actually wrote? Or was he speculating and then somebody picked it up and said, here's what it actually, here's what is
Exactly.
being reported. Is that what happened? Because that does happen.
Yes, that's what it kind of seems like. It kind of seemed like it's more speculation than anything else.
Okay. I would just suggest that on social media, follow actual reporters like Dove Kleiman, whatever the F that is. Just cancel that. Just that's not good. That's a lot of stuff that is a person trying desperately to get attention for themselves. So they will spin stories in totally bogus ways. Find real beat reporters who will tell you the truth. So anyway, well, look, I mean, if that's what he's trying to get, I wouldn't be surprised because he's got the best agent in the world and he's going to aim super high. But really, the guaranteed money is the key. As Kirk Cousins said, the structure is the key. I imagine he's going to want a no trade clause from whoever he is asking to sign him. And Derek Carr got 60 million guaranteed. That would be much closer to what Kirk Cousins would be looking for. But since he said it's what the money represents, then my guess would be that means don't pay me the same average annual value as Derek Carr or less because I'm better than Derek Carr and I'm better than Daniel Jones. And I looked at this today, Manny, and there are 12 quarterbacks who are making more than 40 or 40 and up. And Jared Goff is going to get an extension absolutely guaranteed to be 45 plus. So that would make basically half the league's reasonable starters because there's other people who are on rookie contracts that couldn't be in this ballpark. So anyone who is a reasonable starter or up is making at least 40. If you're Kirk, you can't ask for less than 40. So even Charlie Walter, Charlie Walter, right? Okay,
Yep,
yeah.
Charlie Walters,
Even
shooter.
even
Yep.
Char even Charlie's speculation. Now, all guaranteed, I don't know, but his that would be more than he signed originally for guaranteed. That'd be pretty wild. But his speculation of 45 mil is not out of this world. I mean, that's probably the starting point when you look at other quarterbacks. And Derek Carr signed his deal coming off of his worst season. And Kirk is going to look at that and go, I'm actually coming off a season where I was playing really, really well. He was, I think, sixth by PFF. And one thing to Kirk's credit that if Magic Mike McCartney wants to use, he can. He had the most drops in the NFL through week 8. Surprisingly, that he also had, a lot of receivers dropping the ball, receivers fumbling the ball, and stuff like that. I mean, Kirk's got a pretty good argument to make for being somewhere in the range of 45 million. And maybe this is a little bit for some people who thought like, oh, and again, if it's speculation and not reporting, then I'm not going with that number to say this. But if that is where he is in the range for his starting point of negotiations when they go to the combine and so forth, and the legal tampering period, then there's just absolutely no way. There's just
No,
absolutely no
at all.
universe where the Vikings can do that, right?
No, not at all. And they shouldn't even they shouldn't even ponder it. Like it's just it's not even it's a non-starter for me. Like if I'm even in the camp of wanting to bring Kirk Cousins back, which I'm not in that camp, but if I was considering bringing him back, I'm not bringing him back at that number. Not at age 36 coming off an Achilles when there are other, huge holes and needs on this roster in order to even compete in 2024. There's just no way. It's an absolute non-starter. All due respect to Kirk, I'm just not doing that. It just makes no sense to bring him back at that number at all.
I don't even know what dollar figure would make sense for this team considering the rest of their needs. And even if someone is making 30 mil and then you're adding Justin Jefferson making 30 mil and needing to go into free agency and sign a bunch of people, even 15 million less than Shooter's speculation still makes me go, I don't think so. And that's not where Kirk's going to be. So, hey, if he gets that, man, good for him. Good for him.
Yeah.
Business Hall of Fame. Good job. But I got nothing for that for this team. So yeah, see, this is one of the things that comes up with Bo Nix that I don't understand. Jason says Bo Nix can't read progressions. Oregon was screens and throw to the first guy, never even looked to the second, third, or fourth guy. I mean, I just don't understand how we could really watch on TV and know this, like what the progression was supposed to be. I just told you as far as him throwing down the field, and I can even screen share if everybody wants to see this number. Let's see. Let me find it. I'll find it. I'll find this and I'll screen share with everybody just to show you that I have empirical evidence of what we're looking at. Hold on. Everybody just quietly wait and I will call this up. Like rolling in the projector as a kid. They still do that? All right. Now it looks a little wonky here, but I'm going to fix it. Hold on. All right. So let me clear out our little thing here and everybody can see it. Okay. So if you look close, everyone, at the top is deep throws over 20 yards, where he completed 51% and graded a 95 by PFF, had 119 quarterback rating when he was throwing over 20 yards. When he was throwing over 10 yards, he had a 95 PFF grade, 16 touchdowns, 1 pick, and 145 quarterback rating. And these are adjusted to the NFL. So even when he was holding the ball, if you could see my mouse, for 2.6 or 3 seconds, which would probably involve some progressions, he was still putting up wild numbers. Now, you're right to say, like 27% of his passes being screens, that is a lot. So they were throwing screens for sure. You're not wrong about that. But I mean, when we're talking about throwing down the field, he did it very accurately. So I don't know about that. I also know this. I'll get this right in a second. There we go. I also know this. Nobody in college football can read nothing in the NFL. That's what I also know. That's the reality, Manny, of college to the NFL is that there are not guys who are going to go out there and identify Steve Spagnuolo's defense who are playing in college right now. That's why quarterbacks who sit for a year and learn the NFL, that's why we like them so much, because it is so hard to drop right in and do all of that and understand all of that and make all the checks and all the changes and everything else. This is actually what the Vikings are afraid of, I think, is that it's so darn difficult to read defenses as a rookie that Kevin O'Connell might feel like he has to dial back his offense, which I'm not so sure that he wants to do.
Yeah, and let's just keep it real here. Let's keep it a buck. Like we don't it's there is no exact science to predicting how these guys are going to translate to the NFL. A lot of times what you're looking for with these quarterbacks is you're looking at the physical tools that they have and you are kind of rolling a dice on them coming to your team, fitting into your system, molding them, developing them, and them turning out to be great. I mean, like we've been talking about this for weeks now with all the quarterbacks in the league right now that are the best in the business, that are elite. Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. There were question marks about all of those guys, and people were just picking those guys apart. And there was the thought of Patrick Mahomes that, oh, his footwork is bad and he's throwing, he's throwing off of his back foot and he's just kind of flicking the ball and he's not playing in an NFL offense and all this other stuff. And now he's arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. Why? Because he got drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. He sat for a year, developed, Andy Reid developed his tools and got him more fundamentally sound. And now he's the greatest quarterback in this league. Josh Allen was inaccurate. He was on a group of 5 school in Wyoming, and the numbers weren't great. And even when he got into the league and started out, it was not good. And there were a lot of question marks about, did the Bills make the right decision of drafting this guy? And now he's one of the elite quarterbacks in this league. So I don't know if there's really an exact science of looking at what these guys do in college and predicting that guy's going to be the greatest quarterback of all time because you just don't know. What you do is you look at the physical tools, you look at Bo Nix, and you say he's a good athlete, got a really good arm, seems to be a pretty good leader, won a lot of games. Let's take a chance and put him in our system, see how it goes, and see if we can turn him into a star. That's what you just kind of hope for. And there's just no real perfect way of predicting how that's going to play out for any of these guys, to be honest.
I think that like maybe some of the criticism is the throwing isn't always precise or always throwing to open receivers, or I'm not really sure because when I look at the numbers, I kind of wonder like what is it that's the downside of him? And I guess I'll find this out as I listen to Daniel Jeremiah for 3 straight days watching NFL Network with these Senior Bowl practices and combine and all that stuff going forward, and read a little bit more of what everyone says about him. But I'm looking at a guy who is really big, really fast, and throws the ball hard and has amazing numbers. And I'm like, I mean, yes, he was older. That is absolutely true. But I don't think that that means that you can't develop. We're talking about quarterbacks, even in the NFL, who have to develop from age 24 to 27. I know Lamar Jackson did not have a good game on Sunday, but although I wish Zay Flowers maybe had just taken it down at the one, and then maybe Lamar's stats look a little better. But Lamar has really developed as being in complete command of the pocket. And that's something that this year we saw take off and why he was going to win another MVP, as opposed to kind of just using his amazing physical traits to get people open, scrambling and so forth, and just making good throws downfield. Now he was like really in control of the offense. I think Mahomes has gotten even better at doing all that, which is what makes him unstoppable, right? So I'm not sure that you can't develop as a quarterback from age 24 to 27, 28.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up Patrick Mahomes again because I remember he went on the LeBron James the Shop HBO show at that time. This was shortly after they won the Super Bowl against San Francisco 4 years ago, and he was talking about how he said something like, I don't have the exact quote, but he said something like, I just learned how to read defenses this year. He had just won the Super Bowl, had an MVP under his belt, and had been in the NFL for 3 years. And he's talking about how he had just learned how to read defenses. So, like, that right there is proof that none of these guys are perfect prospects coming out. And depending on where they go, depending on if they have some good weapons around them and a good infrastructure around them, is really what determines how good these guys are. Now, yeah, there's certain guys that were probably going to be bad no matter what. Zach Wilson might be a guy that no matter who took him, he was probably going to be bad. And when you look back at some of the stuff with Zach Wilson at BYU, I know you brought up, the fact that he wasn't a team captain. That might kind of explain like why, yeah, it's probably never really going to work out for Zach Wilson. But that was something that people kind of overlooked. Sometimes it's just like the little things that we don't really think about that ultimately determine how good these guys are. But otherwise, it's just a crapshoot, and you just hope that the guy that you take works out, and you do all the right things. You draft well, you sign good guys in free agency, you build a good roster, and then that's ultimately how you have success long term.
Yeah, with the age thing, I could see where you could look at it from two perspectives. Is like maybe if you're 21 years old, there's the idea that you have so much more to grow from what you are, and I fully understand that. If you're 24, though, are you more capable? I also know that Bo Nix is married. He's kind of like a real boy. He's like a grown up. Like, does it help you? And I know this worked in Jaren Hall's favor, which I know he didn't play well in his game, but I thought that he adapted to NFL environment really, really well this year. And that's why they wanted to give him a chance. He was older than Bo Nix by maybe a year and a half or something. But when Jaren Hall came in, he acted like an NFL player pretty much from the jump. And that's what you'd be looking for Bo Nix. We're not talking about somebody who's 26. We're not talking about the Hendon Hooker jokes. It's going to turn 24. I guess I would be pretty comfortable with that. SD Evo says Nix's ceiling might be limited, but his floor is really high in the right system. Right tools around him, he could be super successful, i.e. Goff, who is very good, but not elite or anything. The Goff part, I mean, I understand what you're saying. He's not Josh Allen or he's not, Patrick Mahomes, but I keep betting on Jared Goff, and I was this close to having it work again. Like I bet on Jared Goff. Like this is a guy I'm going to get behind early on. Because I felt like he was being talked about as just a system quarterback or whatever when he was with McVay, and then he went to the Super Bowl, and then I was this close to having him catch a pass in the end zone to beat the Patriots, and he overthrew it by a bit. And then the same thing happens with the Lions game there, which we'll get to some of that. But Nix is just an interesting prospect because I think people are very skeptical of him because of what they saw early in his career. And when we go back to what he did early in his career, I still got the PFF page up here. He really was not good until he got to Oregon. And so I guess maybe the question might be, was that a product of just going to a different system in Oregon, or was it his development? And I don't know how to answer that question. First, I didn't cover Bo Nix, so we'll try to get somebody on the show at some point who did. And I haven't watched every game of his. I've just been starting to go through a couple of those YouTubes that have like every play, good or bad, not just highlight reels. And I do see enough running, playmaking, throwing the ball hard. I mean, like, I don't know, like you're starting to see the tools come together, and it's got me quite intrigued. But this age thing, I just don't really know. I mean, see, you could show your age and talk about how Jim Kelly and Warren Moon had to go through the USFL and then they showed up in the NFL after a couple of years of development or something. But that definitely makes me feel way too old. Hamza says there is no way the Vikings could trade back and still get Nix, right? I've been really high on Bo. I think he could be great with KOC. Yeah, that's the other thing, Manny, is with the Vikings, you do throw a lot of passes to open wide receivers. That is just a fact. So if that's like a criticism, well, that's that's what Nick Mullins was doing as well. But I have no idea. This is why it's in the headline, because Dane Brugler saying this really took me by surprise. It's like, oh, well, mock draft database has Bo Nix sitting at like 25. So I would have said last night, hey, it kind of looks like it. But now I'm going, wait a minute. Is the NFL about to get really high on Bo Nix? I really have no idea.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, like we were saying before, like we just sometimes these guys they skyrocket up, a few draft boards, and we all think that okay, this guy's going to get picked in the top 10, and then end up falling out of the first round completely. It's just really it's hard to really figure out. It's hard to predict. I think ultimately in the case of the Vikings, I think what you're just hoping for is they take a guy and then it's the right guy and then it just works. You know what I mean? And I think with what they have set up, I know, what the Vikings have right now is not perfect. And certainly, there are fair criticisms of Kevin O'Connell, I think, overall. But, when you look at what they have, you've got the best wide receiver in football. You've got a really good young wide receiver who had a really nice rookie season. You have one of the best tight ends in the league. Now he's coming off a pretty substantial injury, but if everything works out well for TJ Hawkinson, he's one of the best tight ends in the league. You've got an offensive line that is not perfect, but you've got two really good, when they're healthy, tackles that are really going to do a good job of protecting you. You've got some pieces in place to where you can envision a young quarterback stepping in and having some success early on. And maybe you take a guy and he sits for a year. Even better. I mean, it just ultimately what it comes down to is you just have to take a guy and you just have to make it work. You have to find a way for it to work. And if it doesn't, those guys are going to be out of a job and you're going to have a new coach and probably taking a new quarterback a few years from now. So I think you just have to take a swing and just hope for the best.
Jared says anything can work. Can is a loose word. I can become president. Can you, Jared? I see. That's actually a great example because everything is about odds. everything we talk about is about odds. So when we talk about Bo Nix, it's about odds. So we're going to look at his numbers and look at his background and look at how he performed. And then we're going to look at what the scouting community and the draft people and whatever think of him, and then try to figure out what the odds are that he could be a really good quarterback for the Vikings that could take him somewhere. Now, what are the actual odds? If I had to just throw out a number, I'd probably say 3 or 4 out of 10 times a quarterback that you draft 11th overall becomes something, and 1 out of every 20 times he becomes Mahomes. Or and maybe not quite to that level, but like a superstar quarterback. Allen is taken, I think, at 8 or 7, and Mahomes is right there in that same range. So every once in a while, that guy becomes a superstar, and then the other guys don't become guys that you draft on a second or that you sign on a second contract and so forth. Now, what are the odds that Kirk Cousins at age 36 can take you to the NFC Championship? So far, he's never been there. He has never won a home playoff game in his entire career. And it's not entirely about Kirk, but the teams as well. And what are the odds that he's going to get better than he was? What are the odds that you can build a team around him when you've never been able to do this? The odds are not very high. Right. So would I take the 2-10, 3-10 chance that Bo Nix is great and maybe coin flip chance that he's good enough to allow you to build a team versus 0-10, which we've seen out of 10 years of Kirk Cousins starting in the NFL, and he's never taken a team there? Yeah, I think that's the odds are quite a bit better, actually. Is there a guarantee for anything? Of course not. But that's how I think you have to look at this. Is how do all these factors about someone like Bo Nix weigh the odds? Anthony says doesn't matter what the knocks are on any of these QBs coming out of the draft. That's what coaching is about. KOC needs to be confident that he could scheme up the right recipe for any of them. Kevin O'Connell, Manny, is really a wild card here, isn't he?
100%. 100%. And, we have kind of speculated about, the type of quarterback that he might want. But the reality is we don't really even know either. I mean, we think he wants a guy that's a big guy with a big arm that's going to push the ball down the field. But, he's had Matthew Stafford with the Rams. He had Kirk Cousins in Washington, and he's had Kirk Cousins here. So it's the sort of the big pocket passing quarterback that throws the ball down the field has kind of been all he's had. But he's never handpicked, Kevin O'Connell's never handpicked a young quarterback. He hasn't done it yet. We don't know if he can do it or if he can't do it. I want to see him try. That's been my whole viewpoint on all of this since the season ended has been, I want to see him try. I want to see Kevin O'Connell get an opportunity to look at a certain quarterback and say, that's the guy. I like him. Let's take him, and I'm going to grow and mold him into being our quarterback. That I just want to see if he can do it, and I want to find that out. So I don't know, man. It's just something that we don't really know for sure. We don't know for sure if he can grow and develop a young quarterback. We don't know that he can't do it either. So let's just give it a shot. I just want to see it.
I thought this was why you hired him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, look, here's the thing. So we got in a big fight about Harbaugh the other day because I was never for Harbaugh. And then, of course, now they got a GM from the Ravens who's probably going to stack up that roster. Harbaugh is going to win. Then 100 of you are going to come back in the comment section to be like, we told you. But that's fine. You can do that if that works out. But the thing about my main argument against Harbaugh, aside from the absolute circus that comes along with Harbaugh, was the idea that you're taking a long view of this thing, which is hire the former quarterback who's been in the game, not out of the game for 10 years, and give the guy who looks to me like the quarterback, I don't want to say whisperer, but developer, former quarterback recently with the McVay system recently, have him get in the ear of a rookie quarterback, develop them, pair those two together and go forward and hope you end up with a John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson or Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes type relationship that lasts for a really long time. Like that's the ideal world to live in. If you were just all in on trying to win right the freak now, no matter what happens, then I would have been okay with Harbaugh. If that was the goal, then I would have been like, all right, well, look, burn TCO Performance Center to the ground with Jim Harbaugh by any means to try to win. Go ahead. But that wasn't their goal. That wasn't the approach they've taken. So why would you deviate away from that now? I mean, that's how I look at it, right?
Yeah, well, and let's go back to when Jim Harbaugh was hired by the 49ers in 2011. The 49ers were a team that had been it's almost in a lot of ways it was very similar to what Sean McVay stepped into with the Rams in 2017. It was a team that they had drafted a lot of talent in the previous handful of years. They had, really kind of built up a roster, but they were just simply poorly coached, and they needed a guy that could step in right away. It was a team that was ready to take that next step and into contention, and Harbaugh did that with the 49ers. That team was built really well and ready to go. It was just they were coached by Mike Nolan and then Mike Singletary. Like, like that's why Harbaugh was hired, because it was a team that was already constructed and ready to go. Same thing with the Rams with McVay. I mean, that was a team that was really well put together. They had drafted a lot of young talent in the previous years, but they were coached by Jeff Fisher and they weren't going anywhere. So you just brought in another guy that was able to take them to that next level. The Vikings weren't really in that spot in 2022. They were kind of in a different position. They were, kind of transitioning from, a previous era with Mike Zimmer, with a lot of older players, a team that had kind of gone over the hump, so to speak, of, contention, and just didn't really have a lot left. And, it just wasn't the right type of situation. Now, how would 2022 have gone if Harbaugh were coaching? Might have been about the same results. You probably would have won 12 or 13 games, won a weak division. But what would you have done in the playoffs? I don't know if there would have been a lot really there when you consider how things kind of played out. So I think the right decision was made. And if Jim Harbaugh wins 3 Super Bowls with Justin Herbert and the Chargers, then okay, I guess maybe we're wrong. Maybe we were wrong about it. But the Chargers just seem like a team that's kind of in the same spot that the 49ers were in, 13 years ago, where there's a lot of talent. It's a team that with a young quarterback that's kind of maybe ready to take the next step and weren't quite there yet because they weren't as well coached as they should have been. And you just kind of see what happens there with Harbaugh going forward.
And you go back to San Francisco. I guess Harbaugh did put a rookie quarterback in after they drafted a quarterback, despite having a limited veteran quarterback who had kind of proven what his ceiling was. Interesting stuff. Actually, they even went somewhere with Alex Smith and still made a change to get to the next level. But I think in the position they were in, they probably would have kept Dalvin Cook. They would have kept Adam Thielen. They would have kept Eric Kendricks. The direction has all pointed toward this draft for quarterbacks, and you actually have real prospects here. And Groovy Skeptic asked, how does McCarthy's arm stack up? He clearly has legs. I think McCarthy has a really great arm. That's the comparison with him and Nix, because he's 21, and so there's the ceiling. Like, is he going to be able to develop and get better and kind of hone his skills? And that's maybe one of the reasons why they limited him for how often they had him throw the ball, was that he's a little bit wild with the football, but he throws it really hard. It's just that he's a little bit out of control sometimes with his accuracy. And so you'd have to develop and develop. He hasn't thrown a lot of passes in comparison to Bo Nix, but I haven't been very much sold on McCarthy exactly, but if they did it, I'd say, all right. Because I think, like you were saying, Manny, if the NFL evaluates, sorry, sometimes the comments just make me laugh mid-thought, and it's one of my largest challenges in life, actually, is not laughing sometimes when you guys say something funny. That time I did. I'll just put it up on the screen now. I can't hold back on this. Dystopian Utopia said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott. That's a great reference. Great reference. Well done. But if they draft McCarthy, and even though I'm not as bumming on Bo Nix, that's all right. Good. If they've evaluated him as having a first round arm and they want to play Gardner Minshew for a year and develop JJ McCarthy and have him ready to go, that sounds like a great plan. Do that. That'd be totally fine. I don't know, whatever way they go about it, there's about 5 different ways where I'd be like, okay, like if bring in Baker Mayfield, like we talked about the other day, draft a guy. If it's McCarthy, have him develop and so forth, and we'll go from there. Trade up for Jaden Daniels. Maybe that's your move. All right. Like there's a lot of paths where I'd be like, all right, let's go. And picking Bo Nix at 11. One of the major benefits, though, Manny, about picking Bo Nix at 11, if Dane Brugler is not right and he doesn't emerge as a top 10 quarterback, is that you only use your own pick and it doesn't have to destroy your future. That is a really nice benefit of taking someone with your own selection, is that you didn't trade your entire future drafts to do it.
Yeah, it just gives him more options, right? It gives you more opportunities to, add even more talent. If you're in a position, I mean, look, if you want to move up and get Jaden Daniels, we talked about this the other day. If that's the guy you want and you feel like you can move up and get him, go ahead and do that. You know what I mean? But there is something to be said for, like you said, keeping your own pick and having more opportunities to draft even more talent. The Vikings, because of the way the 2022 draft kind of unfolded, it's kind of tough to see how much they're going to get out of that draft class. You're going to have to start hitting on some draft picks. That is going to be a thing that, when you look at what has happened with the Lions and how they've got to this point of being on the doorstep of going to the freaking Super Bowl, they've done that with having higher draft picks and hitting on those draft picks. So, you're kind of that's the risk that you play when you do move up. But on the flip side, if you do move up and you take Jaden Daniels and he's all world and becomes one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, that's going to be pretty good too, because that's going to mean that you're going to be in contention every single year. Because when you look around the NFL, the elite quarterbacks are in the playoffs every year and they're in the Super Bowl conversation every year. I mean, I know everybody's going to have some fun at Lamar Jackson's expense this offseason because of what happened yesterday, but that dude's going to be on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. If he's healthy every year, the Ravens are going to be on the doorstep of the Super Bowl every year because of how great he is. And sign me up for that. You know what I mean? As opposed to where the Vikings have been for the last, 4 or 5 years.
Well, you'll appreciate my reference from yesterday with Lamar Jackson. He's Charles Barkley or he's Reggie Miller, guys who belonged in the NBA Finals, but Michael Jordan just gave him the Mutombo finger wag. No, no, no. You will not be going to the NBA Finals. That's how it is for Mahomes, that he personally has shaped narratives for other great quarterbacks. But you know what? If the Vikings stumbled into a quarterback as good as Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, I will just take my chances that the next Mahomes shows up and ruins it all for everyone. Yotter's painting, I assume it's It might be Yoder's. I know a guy named Yoder, so he pronounces it that way. Anyway, who's the quarterback that you like the most in the draft, regardless of draft position? This is a weird take, Manny. I like Drake May the best, but I think I would draft Caleb Williams. Is that weird? Like, I think like Drake May is so large and just throws such a beautiful football. He kind of reminds me of CJ Stroud, recency bias, of course, but the way that the ball just travels through the air and with such ease, and the guy has such great size, and he's an athlete, he's a playmaker, everything is there. But with Caleb Williams, when you see the high end of Caleb Williams, and we were just talking about all that stuff with reading defenses and whatever else, there's been a million quarterbacks who they said couldn't, including a recent guy from Oregon in Justin Herbert. Go read his scouting reports that said, well, he's not very good at this or that or the other thing. And he's turned, I would take him as well. Maybe he just, needed a better coach. But that's kind of how I feel about this is even if I personally watching both quarterbacks, I'm kind of like, man, I kind of lean Drake May a little bit. I don't know how you could watch the high end and the physical ability of Caleb Williams and not take him because this guy can do just about anything. He has the arm strength to throw from angles you never believe. You shouldn't trust what you see on college tape all the time as much as you trust their arm, their speed, all that sort of stuff. And Josh Allen and even Jordan Love is a good example. Like Jordan Love in college was kind of bad. At Utah State, he threw a ton of picks. Like he made crazy throws, inaccurate throws. But what did you see from time to time? The crazy high end of Jordan Love, and he developed it to be a superstar. And I know people do not like when I say that on the show, but let's just, we gotta be honest with ourselves. The dude was second in the league in touchdowns this year and did what he did in the playoffs and made a Favrean throw at the end. But that's I don't know. Do you like Caleb Williams more, or how are you feeling about that?
I do like the raw ability of Caleb Williams. And you know, this USC did not have a good year, and I know at times it looked like he may have took a step back, but this guy, you go back and look at his 2022 season, the year he won the Heisman Trophy, and he was just amazing. He made every throw, he made every play necessary. I think, USC in 2023, I think the team around him just wasn't as good. And I think he kind of wore a little bit more on his shoulders than what he needed to, than what he did the previous year. And I think at times seemed like he was just trying to do too much, trying to extend a play a little bit too long. And I think we kind of saw a lot of that, especially against Notre Dame, where he really did not play well at all. It just felt like he was doing way too much. And I think it kind of affected him. The team just wasn't as good. And the defense was just an abomination. That USC defense in 2023 was awful. And so I think when you have that pressure, when like, my defense is bad, I got to go down and score a touchdown every single possession, you just try to do too much. And I think that kind of led to some of the bad plays that he made during the season. But again, I think you're, like we said before, we're looking for the physical tools and what those guys can do with their arm, with their athleticism. Can they extend plays, things like that? And then you insert them into what you're trying to do and you mold them and develop them. Now, maybe Caleb Williams is a guy that might need to sit for a year more so than a Drake May or Jaden Daniels or something like that. But I think you have to like the physical tools, and you have to somebody's going to take a chance on him. And, you just hope it's the right team and that they've got the right infrastructure, and eventually he turns into a stud. There's a lot to like about him.
I guess if you're the Vikings, you're hoping that doesn't happen because it will happen in Chicago probably.
True.
I'd be really curious to know what they're saying in their front office with the same exact discussion. I think that the evaluation is really close, and I have been chatting with different people who know enough to know a little bit about this conversation. That's the best I can do for you. And there are some people who believe that Drake May should be the top overall pick. But I keep coming back to some of the things that Caleb Williams is able to do off platform. His running ability is downright prolific at times. You can have him completely bottled up and he can escape for a first down. He can throw the ball running to his left or right, 50, 60 yards down the field. I mean, there's just so much he could do. What I wonder about with Caleb Williams is pressure. And I was thinking about pressure in Lamar Jackson and pressure in Baltimore, and how I think Baltimore, in a lot of ways, felt the pressure, and Dallas, this happens to them all the time, and they just freak out. And I think Caleb Williams freaked out a little bit this year, that when you have that pressure of being called a generational talent, you're on the same level as Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, which I wouldn't put on anybody, by the way. I don't know if anybody will ever again be as the type of prospect that Peyton Manning was. I mean, Andrew Luck was definitely up there, but I mean, you're a Tennessee fan. I mean, you know what that was like with Peyton Manning. I don't think that was that level with Caleb Williams, but when you're being compared to those guys as a prospect, that there is so much on you to win every single game. And then it kind of broke him at times, which may ultimately be good or bad for him. I have no idea, because I saw that after he had some losses and thought, buddy, it's only going to get harder from here. It doesn't get easier. At the same time, he's growing up dealing with this right in front of us. So maybe him kind of breaking under the pressure is a learning experience that he takes to the NFL and is better for ultimately. I really don't know with Caleb Williams. I don't buy some of the stuff that he's like, a diva or whatever else. I mean, I'm not sure that was really it. I think that more, well, he had that thing leaked about wanting a piece of the team, which you can't even do according to the CBA. So that didn't help his case either. But it's a fascinating decision. And I think I like May ever so slightly better, but would probably end up taking Caleb Williams. So we've spent this entire time on the quarterbacks, which of course is going to be a lot of discussion going forward. I wanted to ask you one thing before we wrapped up, which was supposed to take up a much larger chunk of the show. That happens to us sometimes when the chat gets going, and I've loved the enthusiasm of the chat today throughout the show. The meltdown by the Lions. Let's just do this, Manny. 1998, 2009, 2017. We know what those years mean in Viking history. You could throw in 87 if you want.
2000 as well.
2000 is more, 2000 I guess falls under the category of like 2017.
Yeah.
But the fact that 2017 came off of the Minneapolis Miracle, I think made it so much worse. Sure. But take just the shocking meltdowns, the disasters, the drop from Darren Nelson, Gary Anderson, Brett Favre throwing across his body. How would you compare those to what happened to the Lions? Like, if that had happened to the Vikings, where would you rank it in all-time Viking lore? Like, would that be the worst one, or is that not the worst one?
I don't think it would be the worst one. It may, Lions fans might feel a little bit different because it's the first time the Lions have done anything of this magnitude in 32 years, since I was in the second grade. I still go back to 98 because it was, I mean, guys had their bags packed for Miami. There was a song on the radio, that was sort of a playoff with a Will Smith's Miami song. I mean, it was a foregone conclusion that the Vikings were going to go to the Super Bowl, and nobody was stopping them. Nobody was stopping that offense. They were at home. I can't remember what the line was, but they were pretty heavy favorites against the Falcons. And it was like the Falcons, Chris Chandler, like whatever, like who's Chris Chandler? Like, he's been a journeyman guy that had played for like the Rams and the Cardinals and just was just a guy, and he comes in and has the best game of his life. And the crowd noise at the Metrodome has no effect on the Falcons whatsoever. And they just came in and they made plays, and, they got it done. They got it done when the Vikings couldn't. That to me is still the one that kind of sticks out because there was just, I remember being a freshman in high school that year, and the thought of the Vikings losing that game was just like there was no thought of the Vikings losing that game. It was a foregone conclusion they were going to win that game. It was unimaginable. So I that's the one that's still, I mean, if we're comparing it between that and the Lions, I think that's the one that really still kind of stands out to me as a bigger one. Now, Lions fans might feel differently because it's first time in a while for them, and they were up by 17 at the half, and they were dominating that game. and maybe they just felt like it was in the bag at that point. But for me, 98 to me is still kind of a bigger thing because there were just the idea of the Vikings even losing that game was just was non-existent.
We're really speaking Detroit's language here, or actually, sorry, put it the other way around. Detroit is now speaking our language when it comes to these NFC Championship meltdowns. I would say that 1998 is almost untouchable even in NFL history, aside from Norwood missing the field goal to lose the Super Bowl. Like that to me is the all time, but it's right there considering the quality of that team. The 1998 Vikings outscored every team in the NFL this year. That's how good their offense was. We talk about how offense dominates the game and everything else. They outscored every team in the NFL in 2023. That's how dominant they were. And to be so close. See, the thing about the Lions is they could have converted that fourth down, fumbled the next play, missed a field goal after that, scored a field goal, and then still lost the game. It was midway through the third quarter. And that's one of the crazy parts about how it was being debated with the analytics and everything else. They should have just gotten a stop on defense as opposed to giving up a 50-yard pass, regardless of how it happened. That was the main issue there, is that their defense had been playing so well throughout the game and then had a collapse. But it was midway through the third quarter. That's going to be the one that everyone remembers. But that going for that fourth down and having Josh Reynolds drop it and everything else. But Josh Reynolds catching it doesn't guarantee that they even win the game. We're talking about the best offense in football in the 49ers, that they could put up points in a hurry against just about anyone. So for it to play out the way it did and all the crazy events to come after that was pretty nuts. But I think it's harder to be one kick away from the best kicker in the league that year, from an all-time great Hall of Fame kicker. All he's got to do is chip it in and you win and you go to the Super Bowl, and you could very well win it. I know Denver was extremely good, but you could very well win that Super Bowl. To be that close is much different. There was a lot of game to still play with Detroit. And then I think 09 is hard for the same reason. If Brett Favre takes off, if he checks it to Bernard Berry, and we're talking about Ryan Longwell again, not that you can guarantee kickers or anything, but Ryan Longwell was a very, very good kicker. You're probably talking about going to the Super Bowl at that point. And I think in 09, it's hard to say that they would have won the Super Bowl because of the shape that Brett was in. 87 for the olds, and at least we get to call some people older than us, Manny. 87 was the Super Bowl they probably would have won. Though that's the thing, is that Denver team was mediocre. They got crushed by Washington, and you're one reception away from it happening. And that one might be a little more comparable to what happened to the Lions, but the fact that they were right there as far as they, to beat the Broncos, like the opponent in 87 was not as good as the opponents that they would have faced in 98 and 2009. Not a guaranteed Super Bowl, nothing guaranteed for the Vikings, but that should have maybe been the one. But yeah, welcome Lions, welcome. It's been a really long time, but you're here. So now one last thing, Manny, and I know we've gone longer than usual, but we've had a lot of fun here. And we've only got 2 weeks left of the season. Dan Campbell said after, a very dark Dan Campbell said, this might have been our only shot. And certainly Vikings fans know what that's like. They thought 2010 they were going back. They thought 2018 they were going back. I understand what he's saying, and Dan is a realist. He understands like how hard it is to get to the NFC Championship. I don't think Detroit's going anywhere, though. This quarterback has been there a number of times. This roster is super young. They might not get to the Super Bowl, but they're going to be at the top of the NFC North, save for whatever, calamity. Your quarterback hurts his Achilles or something, but I don't see them going anywhere.
I don't either. They're young. They seem to have their quarterback. Jared Goff is very good. The other thing too, Coller, is they got cap space. They're going to have money to spend this offseason. So, like, even we talked about some of the shortcomings they have on defense, like in the secondary and everything. They can go out and spend some money and boost up that defense if they want to. and they've shown signs in these last couple of years of drafting very well too. So I think they're going to be. I sometimes I wonder if Dan Campbell was just kind of just reacting because it's just you're moments removed from a very heartbreaking loss, and your season being over, and you just kind of wonder if he's just reacting in the moment of just like this hurts right now, and just it's all kind of doom and gloom. But I think with what he's done with that team, and leading them, and with the position that they're in right now, that's going to be a scary team. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And the rest of the NFC North and the rest of the NFC, I think has, considering how close they got last night, to getting to the Super Bowl, I think the rest of the NFC is on notice that the Detroit Lions are not a joke anymore. They are not a punchline. They are a serious football team, and they are not disappearing anytime soon.
If anything, we were talking about Harbaugh's teams in San Francisco, kind of feels the same way, where they had huge drafts for a few years, or the New Orleans Saints that had that one huge draft with Ramczyk and Lattimore and Kamara. I think that was right. And they had picked Michael Thomas. It's come up that the Vikings maybe could have selected him from time to time. It's good for Lewis Cine, though, for taking that crown, because it used to be that was the one that always came up. Well, did you know the Vikings could have drafted Michael Thomas? Anyway, yeah, I think this Lions team is in a position to add players. And look, the way that those guys talk about Dan Campbell, I think free agents are going to want to go there.
Yeah.
I think they're going to want to play for him in that culture and in a team that feels like it's close. So the Vikings have to get their offseason right and their decision right, which is draft Bo Nix. Maybe. We'll see how I feel after this week. Anyway, well, Manny and I will talk again on Thursday, and we'll see what comes up before then, because we won't have a game to preview. And then next week will be fun. Early in the week, I'm going to be out in Vegas at Radio Row, promoting the book, which will be cool for a couple days. And then Thursday night, we will have, it's going to be your night, Manny. It's going to be your night. The Thursday before the Super Bowl will be your night. That's going to be Super Bowl history night. That is your night.
Woo-hoo-hoo. Yes, sir. I love it.
That is your night. We're gonna have a lot of fun with that. We'll really put some work into that episode to make it really fun for everybody. Hey, thanks everybody for a great chat tonight. You guys were thoughtful and hilarious, and really appreciate that. Good stuff. So we'll have a lot to discuss. Yeah, we got a Super Bowl. We haven't even talked about whether we like this Super Bowl matchup or not. I'm a little meh, to be honest. I'm a little like, oh, them again. I kind of wanted somebody new, but it should be exciting. So thanks, Manny, for your time. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we will catch you again very soon. I'm thinking Wednesday night for another live chat with everybody. So put it on your calendars. See you guys then.